Hey guys, welcome back to Pretty on Top, where we muse on love and life with a feline gaze. So, on today's episode, we're diving into the taboo. We're talking about affairs, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so, with me today, I have my darling friend Sapna, who I've known for
Hello.
probably 10 years.
Many years.
Many years. She's fabulous. She does jewelry. She's larger than life. She's the life of the party, always. And I think, in the time that we've known each other, there's been ups and there's been downs. Like, we've had some ugly drama in both our respective lives, and we've both come out the other side, I think, smelling like roses.
We're getting there.
Phoenix reborn.
Happy to be here.
Well, it's good to have you on. And one of the reasons I have just the two of us today rather than a bigger group is because I feel like we have a lot to say on this topic. And this topic was something that you actually brought to my attention of let's shine more light on this. Let's talk about this more. And so I'm going to jump right in with some statistics, which I found fascinating. So 25% of affairs end after a week. 60% only last for 6 months. 10% persist for over 6 months. 2% of children are the result of affairs, and 3% marry the lovers they have the affair with, which was quite interesting for me because I would have thought more than 3%.
I would have thought less than 3%.
Really?
Because they usually tend not to work out. But these statistics they transcend all cultures and age groups, so it's a broad statistic.
So I think to start things off, like, why do you think affairs happen? Like, what do you, when we think of an affair, it's like, why do you think it happens? Because I have my own views, but I want to hear yours first.
So, there are so many, I wouldn't say conflicting reasons. There are so many reasons, why an affair could happen. I'm going to give you specifically from, obviously, a woman's perspective to start with. Honestly, sometimes you just end up stumbling on one. It's not something that you've planned.
Yes.
It's not that there is a specific void in your life.
Yes.
It's not like you're going out there looking for somebody else. It's just something that it can be an unplanned thing.
Yes.
And it just happens. So a lot of it is just fate.
Yes.
Sometimes, in some cases, in more cases out of not, you're looking for something.
Yes.
There's a void that you're trying to fill.
Yes.
You're actively seeking some kind of a quick fix, especially if you are already in a serious committed relationship with someone. You don't necessarily want to break out of that.
Yes.
It's not that easy if you have children. So, affairs for a while, could be a quick fix.
Yes.
It's an escape. So there are lots of reasons, why you could sort of, get into one of these things. More often than not, they end up pretty painful.
Well, that's just it. Like, I think in movies and in pop culture and all that, you have these affairs that happen because people are just like, oh my gosh, I'm so hot for you right now.
It's the love and the lust and
exactly
all
like
the good things
in
that
that
go with
film.
it.
My husband loves to quote "Liaison dangereuse." It goes, "It's beyond my control."
Well,
but I feel like in reality, it's not the case. Like, that's my view, because I think I overthink things. And the whole idea that, oh my gosh, I see you, I want you, let's get it on, baby. Like, I just, for me, I think it would be more emotional. Like, it would probably be something that happens over a period of time where friendship develops or, connection, emotion. I don't think for me, it would just be like this insta love, insta lust or whatever, but I'm just coming from my perspective.
I think there are different kinds of affairs.
Yes, I think
there can be mental affairs, there can be emotional affairs, there can be financial affairs, there can be physical affairs.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Physiological affairs.
Yes.
So it just depends. You can be in a completely, in a sexual affair and not have a conversation with the other person ever. It's like wham, bam, thank you, and that's it. And, or it can just be a mental affair. today, my sister is a sexual counselor. We talk about this all the time. You can have an affair with ChatGPT. You know what I mean? It's just I think the question is we need to go a little bit back and classify and quantify what an affair really is.
Yes.
Is it by definition you cheating on somebody? Is it a state of mind?
Yes.
But there can be several different angles to it.
Well, because like an affair to me and cheating to being a kept woman, they're all very different things.
Yes.
Because to me, cheating is like maybe one off, but whereas an affair is, it's a longer period. It's dedication, it's commitment to some extent.
Yeah.
And then women, obviously, it's like, there's more money and strings attached. It's not, so that's how I define affair. I think it's something that there's an emotional connection, there's a sexual connection, there is this seed of
the
more.
traditional definition of it, that you are actually in a monogamous relationship with someone within the confines of monogamy, be it marriage or just a commitment to each other, and you stray.
Yes.
And so that's the traditional definition of it. So we can, we'll focus on that.
Yes.
For today's talk and stuff. And but still that you can still end up. So obviously the sexual affair is more a stigma, and that's more looked down upon than a mental one.
Right.
You can even have a mental affair with another girlfriend if you're married to a man. It doesn't matter. But I think it's the sexual bit that's more stigmatized.
Yes.
It's also the harder one to get over.
Right.
Because there's intimacy involved.
Right.
So
which I think as women we tend to kind of fall harder into.
We tend to nest.
Yeah.
My partner has a little bit of a saying. He laughs. He's like, you have a woman has intimate relationships, intimate relations with a man like more than twice, and she starts to nest. I mean, she starts to think about curtains and rugs. And how to do up his house.
True.
So it's very
but
true.
We are just built differently,
very, very
right?
True.
We're built differently.
We're hardwired differently. We're wired differently.
But going back to like what you were saying about the stigma as well, right? Like, because I think when you have the affair, the stigma is so much harder on the women. Like, we just bear that.
Because it's still a man's world.
It is, and
predominantly.
And I think throughout history, right, we as a woman have more to show for a loss of virtue, for lack of a better word. We're the one with the hymen that gets broken.
Yeah.
I mean, the men don't have
and
that.
The spirit.
Right, and the spirit. We're the ones that can get pregnant and quote unquote get into trouble. We're the one that is, got the scarlet letter if we stray, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think to this day, right, that kind of stigma still very much falls on women. Like, we have the shorter end of the stick. I think guys get away with it way more if they stray than women do.
We tend to take more ownership as well. I mean, I find around us. That's for one.
Yeah.
Men typically tend to run in the opposite direction.
Right.
When they say when the proverbial shit hits the fan.
Yes.
You know what I mean? It's like they don't want to really be left there with a mess to clean up.
Yes.
Women usually, and that goes back to our emotional makeup, our hormonal makeup. That's just women. We're wired like that.
Yes.
So while the going is good and everyone's happy and there's a status quo, it's great.
Yes.
What happens is women tend to get emotionally involved.
Yes.
Because they start to nest, as I said. You're thinking about taking, and the moment there's intimacy, involved, then it becomes a little bit of a different take for a woman altogether.
Yes.
For men, they just like it as is within the confines of that particular,
Yes.
Situation. And the moment it starts to get a little hot and heavy in the wrong way,
They get scared. They get cold feet.
They get scared. They run. They don't want to clean up this mess.
Yes.
And that's it. So 9 times out of 10, they don't end really well, which is why I'm surprised. Going back to your statistic of 3, I think that's quite high. I would say probably 0.
Well, bear in mind, 3% end up marrying, but 2% of children are from affairs. So maybe 2% of the 3, they don't have a choice.
Out of wedlock. Yeah, basically.
They're like, you gotta marry me.
It. Yeah,
I'm having your baby. So that means it's just 1%.
Yeah, a trick. I mean, if this is what it takes to keep you and to keep this going, then this is what I'm going to do. It's like a trick.
So, I mean, I think I talk about this in my friendships in the previous podcast as well, that like, for me, I had quite a religious upbringing. So like my husband is the only person I've been with, and we have this very traditional kind of relationship, and it works. So the whole idea of an affair is like so incredibly taboo to me, right? And I think I have a really hard time wrapping my head around the fact that why would you not end something before you begin something new? Why would you not just have it clean? Like, if it's not working with the husband, just end it before you start something new with new guy.
Or new girl.
Or new girl. Or new they. I mean,
exactly.
But it's like,
new pronoun.
I think for me, because I'm just coming from this place of a little bit of naivety, I think, with friends that I talk to that are having affairs, and obviously I'm not going to say who, but it's like, why don't you end things? And they try to explain it to me, but I still have a hard time wrapping my head around it. Like, why do you think people don't
Women
have
in
a clean
particular?
break before they embark on this new chapter?
Actually, both men and women. So it's not that easy. So for the record, I agree with you. I think you need to, on a clean slate, if it's really not working, for one, and I always say this to my partner, if it really doesn't work, and my ex-husband as well, we need to call it. Because there's no point if you're not going to be, or don't get married.
Yes.
You know why? I actually subscribe to the institution of marriage.
Yes.
I'm like, if
Me
you're
too.
doing it,
Yes.
I'm relatively old-fashioned in that sense. If you're doing it, then you do it with a sense of purpose.
Yes.
And you sort it out.
Yes.
You've got resources at your disposal. Be it counseling or be it whatever it is that you can take advantage of to make it work, but you have to want to make it work, both sides. Okay, it's not easy.
Yeah.
It's never easy. As far as affairs are concerned, and like I said, I agree with you. End this and start again. But
But
sometimes
they
it just doesn't work out like that.
But do you think they don't because, and obviously, again, I'm like playing devil's advocate here, but do you think they don't because they're scared of leaving something
Yes.
good, or maybe not
Yes.
so good, but half good for the unknown,
It's the convenience.
right?
It's the convenience,
But
especially
it's also then the lack of faith.
especially for Indian women.
Okay.
I'm going to be specific now. For Indian women, marriage, culturally, you've been taught, you just turn a blind eye, you get married, you be a good housewife, you bear children and so on and so forth. And if for any reason your husband tends to stray, you just turn a blind eye and you carry on with what you're doing, because you know what? They never leave their wives, they'll come back. Okay. You, on the other hand, there's no question of you straying at all. I mean, that's completely unheard of. And women just tend to stay. I'm talking about the husband having an affair now.
Yes.
Right? The husband having an affair.
But the women
or
do
goes
not
on.
have affairs while the husband have affairs?
We'll speak up on men first. Most women don't end up having affairs. It's mostly the men. It's rather unheard of in the Indian
Right.
community.
Right.
With men, it's ubiquitous. It's rampant. I mean, they're known. It could be a 1-month affair. It could be a 1-year affair. It could be a lifelong affair.
it's like an open
with
secret.
someone. It's open season.
Right.
I mean, he could have a parallel
Oh my
family.
gosh.
You know what I mean? He could have a parallel family. He could have children with another lady. But they just keep them very separate, out of the confines of
Yeah.
their marriage. So it's not like this is any less of a marriage.
Yes.
This is marriage by definition.
Yeah.
But this is also marriage by a different state of affairs. No
Is that
pun
because
intended.
that there is this kind of culture of arranged marriages, and so if that choice is
It's-
taken away from you, do you think that you strive for some kind of agency by finding your own
It's
other half, so to speak?
For men, I think it's a prerogative.
Right.
So it's culture period. Yes, it is. I mean, this is how you're brought up. Even if it's not an arranged marriage, you are brought up.
So they still do it
thinking
even if it's not an arranged marriage.
the woman comes second. She's always a subordinate.
Yeah.
She's always there to support her husband in whatever he does, in
Yes.
every endeavor. And women swear by that, and they
Yes.
live by that.
Right.
I have, of course, as you know, Grace, well enough, my entire extended social circle is mostly Indian.
Yeah.
And that's the case with
I'm your token
all-
Chinese. Thank you.
You're welcome. Welcome to the team.
Yeah.
So, it's just, this is how you're brought up, that, okay, you are not being subordinate, but being sort of an ally and an aid to your husband no matter
Yes.
what. And this is one part of it, right? So they go on and they do whatever it is. And,
Yeah. So they're aware of their role and they fulfill it.
they're aware of their role, you bear children and stuff. But I found a lot of times, even when husband, they cheat or they
Mm-hmm.
stray, they always tend to come back full circle.
Yes.
They never leave their wives.
Yes.
They never leave their wives. They fulfill all their responsibilities
Yes.
on both ends. If they have another family somewhere, so they are aware of their responsibilities. They work hard. They fulfill these responsibilities. Women more often tend not to cheat because they're scared. They're scared because
The loss
Hell-
of livelihood.
I say the loss of their life. I say hell hath no fury like a man scorned. Right? Because if he were to
I mean, the
find
old
out-
word cuckold.
Oh, seriously. I mean,
You're a
it-
cuckold.
they would never be able to live it down, and the man would just literally,
Yeah. It's like they're
I mean-
castrated.
yeah. It's like, it's literally they're castrated. So that's why I think and it also doesn't come to them that naturally. I'm speaking more about South Asian women now, culturally. It's
Yes.
not something that you'd sit around and be like, okay, you know what, my husband's strayed, and I think he's actually having a relationship with somebody else.
Yes.
And do you think am I really unhappy? What am I unhappy about? They don't really break it down.
Right.
Am I missing the intimacy?
Yes.
I think they're just not taught to think like that.
Well, and there's
So
like
they
a
don't think like
community of
that.
these women, right? If it's so
Big.
it's like if it's such a done thing, then they've got support in that they're
I mean, today
supporting
we're
each
practically 2
other.
billion people across, more than that across the world.
But they have a lot in common with one another. With like, well, my husband's with this person. Yeah, well, my husband is too.
They do. Literally, I mean, a lot of people don't talk about it.
Right.
It's understood
Which is a
amongst
shame.
it's understood amongst friends that look, it's a given that maybe we know your husband has done something or whatever. It is. We don't really bring it up until there's a very close friend who's desperately unhappy.
Yes.
And she wants to talk about it and she wants to confide. But it's also that stigma, like, oh God, this is actually what's happening in my
Yes.
family. Everyone wants the facade of keeping it perfect.
And it's embarrassing, right?
And it's embarrassing.
Right? Because like I think being wanted, being desired,
it's distasteful and it's embarrassing.
is a part of a woman's part and parcel, right?
Yeah.
And so to have your other half, whether it's arranged or not,
Yeah.
stray, is a direct diss on who you are as the woman and what you bring to the table. I mean, in my Chinese culture, the idea of affairs is kind of similar to, I think, Indian culture, just Asian.
Very similar.
Whereby if you're successful, if you have money, one of the things that you must have is a mistress.
Prerogative.
Right? Like if you don't,
Make it
well,
a
you're
prerogative,
clearly not doing well enough. The fact that you
Yeah.
don't have a hussy on
It's
the
a
side.
status thing. Yeah.
It's a status
It's a
thing. You
status
got
thing.
it. You
Yeah.
got it. This is it. It's a status thing. And the wives kind of, as you said as well, in Indian culture, know about it. They turn a blind eye to it.
Absolutely.
They just don't want a baby at the door. As long as
Yeah.
there's no baby at the door,
and
it's
it's
like,
happened. And they've taken in the babies as well. They've realized if they want to keep this
gosh.
unit, the woman is always the one trying to keep the family unit together.
Yes.
They realize that, okay, if this is what it takes to keep the family unit together, if there's a baby or two on the side, eventually, and there is a parallel life or a parallel family, most Indian women or most South Asian will turn around and
Yeah.
say, okay, you know what, it is what it is.
Yes.
We just don't want to break up our family unit.
Yes.
And the men seem to get away with it
Yes.
all the time. And the funny thing is, or the sad thing is, it's not just getting away with it. I don't think they know any better or they realize any better. It's literally like you said, it's how they're wired. It's like a prerogative thing.
Yes.
Have dick, must cheat. Pardon my French. You know what I
Yes.
mean? It's
Yeah.
literally like it's literally that bad.
no, it's it's populating the earth.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, oh look, plant
It's your
seed here, plant
legacy.
your seed there.
Look at Elon Musk.
And-
How many does he have now? 12.
Well, he says he wants to, literally, he says, I think what did he say? He wants to have about 100,
Oh,
right?
he wants
I mean, the
to.
man is absolutely crazy. It's absolutely crazy. But, for men, and a lot of these men actually do end up having full-blown, pun intended, relationships
Yeah.
with these women
Yes.
that they don't have with their wives. They become emotional crutches, they become
Yes.
physical crutches, they become confidants and
Yes.
lovers and so on and so forth. And
Do you
it's
think
just
that's
really
because
sad.
they can't be themselves necessarily with the wives? Because it's like, this is the mother of my children. So in some respects, if the man has a, dare I say,
Yes.
a big ego,
Yes.
he doesn't ever
Yes.
want to seem like he's wanting
Yes.
anything. And whereas with his, lover, he could be like, I don't know, I want to suck your toes.
No, you know what I mean? Okay, I'm going to go a little bit out on a limb and say this, and we can.
I mean, I just talked about foot fetish, so I think
well,
you
this
can
is
say
worse,
anything from
right?
now.
Like my partner will say, I don't want you to do certain things to me because, God, you're practically my wife and stuff and everything. But
Yeah.
it's not what you'd say to your mistress. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's also from the men's side. It's like, okay, because this whole sort of image of this Sati Savitri, this holy Indian woman enshrined in in this holiness or whatever it is really something that we've all grown up with. It's
Yes.
a cultural thing.
Yes.
It's a cultural thing, and so men just find it easier to just keep it as is.
Yes.
And then do whatever it is at the other end.
So when I first moved to Singapore, which was like 15, 16 years ago, not that I think the culture's changed much, but when I first moved here, I did date a few local guys. So like Singapore Chinese. I know, right, exactly. But what was so interesting is, well, I fell into the whole dating this trust fund kid, I don't know what you want to call it. Genre, if you will. And it was so shocking to me because it's like these guys are educated, right? They often are educated in the UK. They obviously have a lot of money to spend. I think they could probably go into a club and pull. No problem. They're not like hideous looking or anything. And like I said, they're educated, they're charming, they're well spoken. But they didn't want that. They wanted to go to the KTVs where the girls line up and they can just pick. And I remember saying this to my ex-boyfriend because he took me to one of those KTVs once. He was like, just so you know, like, you know, what goes on.
Yeah.
I mean, it was literally a lineup. And it was so freaky to me because these guys, I'm not going to say who because you probably know who they are, but it was like they would rather go to something like that and have their pick rather than go up to a girl at a club and risk rejection.
Yeah.
They just wanted ease.
But that was just for the night. That was not for a life.
Oh, but often
it becomes a life partner.
It's an addiction, right?
Yeah.
Having somebody who caters to your every whim, who's like, oh my gosh, you're so amazing. You know, like this very... this girl that acquiesces to everything can be quite addicting. And if you get addicted to that type of girl, it's like being addicted to porn. How can you actually be with a real person?
Yeah.
A real person is going to always fall because a real woman is going to have her views.
Yeah.
So I do think that when it comes to men and affairs, it's a lot more complicated than women. I think for women, for me, it's like you probably are emotionally drawn to this person. So it has a root of this emotional connection.
Yeah.
Or as you brought up earlier, it may have something to do with financials.
Yeah. So I think it's the other way around. I think for men it's very simple. An affair is sexual, boom, you're done. Sometimes you get involved emotionally, sometimes you don't get involved emotionally. You know, for me...
They're basic.
They're very basic, and men are basic. I'm sorry. You know, like they say, their brains are in their
Sorry,
balls.
man.
Okay?
You basic.
No apologies from me. So, you know, it's just, they just, you know, that's it, one-track mind. For women, it tends to get complicated. It tends to get complicated because women also, you know, you tend to beat yourself up. You second guess everything. You know, the guilt sinks in, and then of course the complications of getting involved and getting you know engaged with someone else, or not engaged to, but you know getting yourself embroiled in these situations, how to extricate yourself and stuff. So it ends up getting so complicated for a woman while she's simultaneously either falling in love with this person, or you know he's getting under his skin and stuff. Men, it's easy. They walk in, they walk out. Again, like I said, 90% of the time, these women don't end up becoming their spouses, especially if they're already married.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
So it's just, I think the question is, it's back to men and women, you know?
Right.
Like different makeup, you know, different hormonal makeup and stuff. And the sad thing is that even in this day and age, things haven't changed that much.
Yes. No, and I think that when I think about affairs, I often think about a powerful man, rich, you know, in a position of power with a younger girl.
Yeah.
Right. And we sometimes call it midlife crisis. Yeah. It's less with a woman of maybe the same level.
Yeah.
Or, you know what I mean? Like it's often with like a younger.
So it's a power play.
Kind of.
Yeah.
And I do think that when they actually then have the affair with someone who is like on the same level and caliber as them, that's maybe when it can get serious.
Yeah.
And that's when it's more than just basic.
When she kind of puts him in his place.
Kind of.
And says, honey, I have a brain too, not just a vagina.
Well, I mean, I always say that. Like, you know, the superficial can only get you so far. You want to properly keep a man, you got to read a book.
Seriously, or two. No, absolutely. And it's such a cliche, but you're right. It is always, it's more of a power play. It's more a power equation.
Yes.
And men, you know why they do that, right? Because it's easier for them to get the woman, for lack of a better way to put it.
Oh, for sure. Buy them a handbag and, you know, you got your way in.
It. I mean, I know there's a lady that I know and, you know, who actually approached my partner many years ago, and they used to work together. They used to work together.
I probably know who she is.
And said, literally, okay. And she was a client, and you know, she said, listen, I'm happy to be your mistress.
Right.
I just need this many vacations and these many bags this year, and I'm good to go.
Good to go.
You know,
ride me like a.
So, but why do women stoop to these levels? You know.
Yeah.
I mean, why do we feel that we can't do any better? That we have to be, you know, a slave to all this, you know, to all this bullshit. Literally.
Why do you think
both
that?
ends, the wife and you know, and as a mistress.
Yes.
You know, I mean, I think women, for one, are a lot more emotional.
Yes.
That's the overriding reason. We just tend to get a lot more involved.
Yes.
We get a lot more invested.
Yes.
From the wife's point of view, she wants to keep the unit together because she doesn't know, these are her children. and she's the mom. These are her
Yes.
children. These are her little babies.
Yes.
She doesn't want to see it break up. And honestly, she has nowhere else to go.
Right. No,
She has
exactly. We
got
have more to
no-
lose, right? It
She's
boils
got
down
no
to that.
Financial
Yes.
fallback plan,
Yes.
which is sad, which is now we're trying to empower women more. Like I tell my children all the time, your career comes first. You got to save up the nest egg and stuff. And then, then you can see how you go as far as relationships are concerned. What I'm trying to say is don't be in that situation eventually 20 years down the line where you're somebody's mistress or you're having an affair. It is quite distasteful and there really isn't much need for it.
Yeah.
If you have your head on your shoulders.
Yes.
So from the wife's perspective, there's really not much that she can do.
Yes.
There's no fallback plan. Like,
Yes.
where is she going to leave and go?
Yes.
Even if the husband says, okay, you know what, I'm going to give you this large sum of money and I want you out of my life, she'd stay because it's almost like that's her identity.
Yes.
Being with this Mr. X, Y, and Z, whatever it is her identity.
Yes.
She really hasn't had much of a chance to build up an identity of her own.
No, because
during
when
the course
we
of her
are
life.
growing up, right, like, okay, a career is an option, but being a kind of a mother, a wife,
Yeah.
a housewife is an option for women.
You can do both.
You can do both,
You
but
can
I'm
do
saying
both.
that you could choose that path. Whereas for men, you
Yeah.
can't choose that path. Like a guy doesn't go, no, I'm going to be a house dad.
Well, you can. I have friends these days that are house dads, and they
Yeah, but
make
they fall
great house
into
dads.
that. They
but
don't-
they've worked their entire lives.
Yeah, they're
done
not- they're
extremely
not
well.
Trying, it wasn't
They're
an option
financially
to them.
self-sufficient, and they actually enjoy spending time with their children because it's in a matter of years these children are gone, right?
But they didn't
So
start out as that.
They didn't start out as
Whereas
that. and
women
it's
can
rare.
and do
It's rare, yes.
start out as that,
Yeah.
right? And
That's
I think
their MO. That's how
exactly.
Yeah.
And so as a result, they find it hard to leave the safety
Yep.
of everything they know.
They don't know anything else outside of the world as this. It becomes like an identity crisis. Like,
Yes.
it's this, what am I gonna, because, and this is also a function of the entire community
Yes.
being so close-knit.
Yes.
That what are my friends gonna say? What am I gonna do? How am I
Yes.
gonna be the only single one? No one's gonna invite me to a
Yes.
party if I'm single.
Yes.
Because she's gonna think I'm gonna run off with her husband. We hear this
All the
nonsense all the
time.
time.
My
Last
gosh.
night we were at a dinner where someone said, and this is a guy. We were having dinner with another friend, and said, I get limited invitations when I travel to India and stuff, and when my wife is not with me, because they think that I'm going to run off with some of their wives. So it works both ways.
Right.
It's such a
Finally, some
short-sighted way.
equality.
Such a short-sighted way of thinking. That's from the wife's perspective.
Yes.
From the person who's having the affair, the lady who's having the affair, I think she just tends to get too emotionally involved.
Yes.
And the question is, back to yours, why was there a void in her relationship?
Yes.
Because, or maybe it's not an affair from her perspective at all. Maybe this is the real relationship.
Right.
And there was nothing else there on the other side,
Yes.
So it just depends. Of course, it's an affair if you're married to someone else. But I think it's much harder for the mistress than it is for the wife. Because again, 90% of the time, the wife always ends up, she's still there, she gets taken care of. It's the mistress who's usually discarded.
Yes.
Like, this famous saying, they never leave their wives.
They never
It is
leave
very
their
true.
wives.
They never do.
So apparently, I looked up the statistic. So I'm going to bore you with the statistic. So 15 to 20% of married couples engage in infidelity, and the rate of infidelity tends to increase with age for both men and women, hence the midlife crisis.
Consenting infidelity. Open marriages.
And then, even more interesting, that so 40% of those who conduct affairs end up getting divorced. So that was a bit.
That's a big number.
I feel like you said at the beginning just
Yeah.
now,
Yeah.
we're looking at overarching global. This is not Indian and this
Yeah.
is not
Yeah.
Chinese, because
Sure.
I know from Chinese families growing up, they don't leave their wives.
Yep.
So I
Indian
think this
families,
40% is probably
same.
from US and UK.
I think it's now even, it's the same, again, by definition. Asian families, I'm going to say Indians and Chinese mostly culturally, because we're very similar.
Very.
They don't end up leaving their wives. They end up having, several kids and stuff. They'll have the
Yeah.
mistresses on the side. They'll have the parallel family on the side. They'll have another woman, or she's her emotional, physical crutch, whatever. Sometimes they end up having, children with these women.
Do you know how many
but they
people I
don't.
meet at fashion events in Singapore? And they're literally here with their babies because they're the misters. They've been sent here from China.
Yeah.
So many. And they're open about it.
Yeah.
They're like, well,
I knew someone else who was someone, sadly, who was someone's partner. This was a very well-known politician in India, and someone's partner, and they had 3 children together, and it only came out after he passed away. He set her up completely. He set the children up completely and stuff. She moved out of Singapore and stuff. And so you hear these sad stories all the time. But my question is, what about the woman's self-worth? I mean, do you really need to put up with being the other woman your entire life? I mean, you've got to have a little bit more self-worth than that. Let's work on that. Let's talk about that. What can you do to arm you and empower you a little bit more so you don't end up being in a situation like that?
But it's about being vocal with your wants, right? Like, we're both highly educated. We're both very vocal. I think you can agree with that.
I think the education makes a big difference. The awareness makes a big difference.
Right. And the education just allows you to know your worth.
Yeah.
And to
awareness.
Put forward your worth of, I deserve more than this.
Of course.
You don't get to put baby in a corner, right? Like, you want me, then you have to show for it. Like, prove to me. Whereas I think a lot of women struggle with that kind of confidence. So when a guy maybe showers them with attention and gifts, they feel like, okay, this is as good as it gets.
So it's exposure. I grew up in Bombay, which is now Mumbai, and I grew up in a very liberal home. My father was not
your
the kind
sister
of person,
is a what?
You know my sister, and hopefully she'll get.
We want her on the next episode, guys.
But so my father and the men in the family, it was a joint family and stuff. So very traditional in some senses, in some sense of the word. But he never said to me, "Go to school, get married, have children, and just be." He said, "You be you, and you do you." Okay, I'm going to empower you with whatever it is that I can within my resources. Education, you want to work in the family business, you guys are creative, come join me, so on and so forth. But you do not have to play second fiddle to a man at all.
Which is so modern.
Which is very modern,
thinking,
very
right?
liberal. My mom was a little bit more traditional. She said, okay, get married. And, it was always this, if you don't have sex with your husband, or if you don't give him some time, he's going to stray. Which I think is the most ridiculous thing. I mean, you have to keep a man busy physically for him not to look at another woman. Really? What does it say about men or about the man that he literally only thinks with his with his appendage?
So my dad is like quite a young dad. So my dad is only 65. Right. And my husband's 52. Sorry, baby. I gave your age away.
Jamie, we love you. You look fantastic. You look fantastic, period.
But when we met up in Japan, this was like a few years ago, my dad was literally saying to me, your husband is still looking really good. You should watch yourself. Women will come on to him. I mean, he's doing well. He's successful. He's looking good. And I'm like...
He's not wrong.
I'm like, Daddy, please. He needs to worry about this.
No, but that's the thing.
It's like he's coming from a very archaic, right? Like male perspective of... Men who have money, men who have power,
and
have the power, therefore, like, to be able to stray. Whereas he was like, well, you're like in your 30s now. You're like a brown leaf. I'm like, thanks, Dad. Thanks that you think I'm a brown, shriveled up leaf.
I mean, it was...
And I was literally like, no, he needs to watch me, okay? He needs to make sure I don't stray. And he's like, no, you're done, honey. Your time is over.
Yes, you're right. It's a very... very outdated traditional view, which my grandfather had. Not my dad, like as I said, but
your dad sounds amazing.
He really was. It's across the board. That is the general consensus and the general view. Like, you don't worry about you. You've had your children. You this, and if he wants to go ahead and do what he wants to, and if he wants to have a little bit of fun on the side, you don't worry about it. You just keep it together. Don't worry. So it's just
I like that. Don't worry.
It's how you've been brought up. It's how you've been brainwashed and brought up. Both, Chinese and Indians, very similar culturally. And this is what needs to be changed. And this is
the voice. We have to fight for our voice.
The good thing is it's changing.
It is.
It's changing today because I see even with, and it's amazing, right? Men who think like this, they end up having girls. Okay, and then they have
it's karma, honey.
Sons-in-laws and daughters, and then they're like,
absolute karma.
Okay, maybe, I should think about, what I've done in the past and maybe try and be a little bit more of an upstanding person. So what goes around comes around, but it is changing. It's changing. I can see in my generation and of course the future generations to come, but it's slowly it's planting some serious roots and hopefully, for a better future, at least for these women, not to get themselves into these situations which are painful.
It's painful.
unnecessarily
Okay,
painful.
so can we
No
talk about that?
self-worth.
Because, when you have the affair, right? It's like when they talk about it takes a village to raise a child kind of a thing. When you have an affair, it's not just between the two. It's not just between the four, right? If you have an affair, it could be the knock-on effect is huge, right? It's not just it's the parties involved, it's the children potentially involved, it's the fallout from friends, from society, from all sorts of things.
And if people know, then they're judging you.
Oh, they're judging you for
It's that,
sure.
it's that stigma.
Yes.
And then, there's more than the frustration from the wife's point of view. More frustration builds up. For men, I've found from my experience, it's an escape. It's an escape. And again, I'm speaking, more specifically Indian men. They don't want to deal.
Right.
They don't want confrontation.
Right.
They don't want unpleasantness. So they just run. It's an escape. Whether it turns into something else or it morphs into something else is a different story altogether. But it's just something that, because they're not taught, they weren't taught growing up how to deal with these issues. I don't think there's a single Indian mother or grandmother said, you know what, why don't you sit down and speak to your wife? They've always been given this carte blanche to do whatever it is that they want.
Yes. And it's ironic because it's coming from the women. The women are giving their male children this kind of power to do whatever they want.
I think it's a lack of power.
Well, I mean, they're
think they're
giving them the
disempowering
carte
them,
blanche,
that's the word
right?
to
They're
use.
telling them they're like God's gift to women and
But
they
I mean,
can
what
do
I
no
mean is in
wrong.
the longer run, it's like disempowering them. I mean, they're not creating upstanding individuals.
Oh no, I think it's
they're creating
atrocious.
cowards.
I think a really strong man is one who values women, cherishes women, and see us as equals, right? And I think when you come from a Chinese and an Indian background, like you see so much male toxicity.
Of course. Yeah, it's all pervasive.
Right. And especially when they look so gross and they've got the pot belly, right? I mean, they are
We were
just
talking about this just
like
yesterday as
freaking
well.
like Animal Farm. And then they're like, hey, baby. It's like,
How the hell did
sorry,
that
you think
happen?
you have a chance with me?
And someone turned around and said, honey, you know what? But when I stand on my wallet, I'm fine. And I'm like, oh my God. Again, there you go. It's that prerogative. No, I digress. But wait, sorry. What were we talking
So
about?
going back, I think, okay, so I took a tangent, obviously, sorry. But going back to the main point, I think one of the things that I really find interesting is though I'm the first to be like, ooh, I'm not so sure about the whole idea of affairs. Like, I'm a huge bookworm. Okay, and it's not always highbrow stuff, but we're not going to go into that.
That's for another time.
But we will talk about the fact that I love a good love triangle.
It's exciting. It's cloak and dagger.
So I love the idea of like I'm smiling so brightly.
Very Mills and Boone.
I love the idea of like two guys chasing the same girl.
Yeah.
Like it's good to be desired.
Yeah,
Like
of course.
And I think, I may have instigated a bit of like my husband's whole jealous persona because I quite like the idea deep down, way deep down, that I don't really want to go into it, but I think I quite like the idea of men fighting over me.
Yeah. It happened to me this morning. I'll tell you the story.
Oh, please do, because this whole wanting
At
to
the
be
gym.
desired, I do think as women, it is one of the triggers for an affair because it's nice to be wanted.
I think it's also women. I think it goes back to how we are, wired and so on and so forth. But I mean, you're right. I'll tell you about the story this morning. And it was like Jay and I were at the gym, and there's this creepy gentleman who is always, giving me the glad eye and stuff at the club. And
Did you have the girls
today,
out?
I had the girls, with or without the girls. And then, and he told me later, and he said, this guy was asking about you. And I actually told him that, he's like, oh, Sapna's your partner? Oh, she's I didn't even know that. And I don't think it's ever going to bother you ever again.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we like that. We want to feel desired. We want to feel
Even
like...
though we're like,
we
ick,
wanna
we're
feel
like,
like-
oh, that's so gross.
Yeah, I
like,
know.
he's so gross. But
and
inside, we're also like,
Yes, exactly. We're preening and stuff,
We're
So we
so
want to be
preening.
desired. We want to feel like we belong, Again, that's the maternal thing. That's the maternal instinct in us. We want to feel like we belong. We want to feel like we're a part of this particular unit.
Yes.
We want to feel, like, oh God, he's fighting for me.
Yes.
From the man's point of view, from men's point of view, it's more an ego tussle. right?
They
That's
love
what
it too
is.
because they love the idea that they've got someone, a hot
Yeah.
commodity
Yes.
that the other guys want.
Exactly.
It gives them kudos too. It's, I mean,
It's an
trophies,
ego
right?
thing. Yeah, it's an ego thing. So you know what? My property, as Jess says, my goods and chattel, okay, which is hilarious. So lay off. But I mean,
Well, I mean, he's British
yeah.
educated. He can't help himself.
Can't help himself. Short of the cravat, he can't help himself. So, but you know, it's just sad. I mean, I think the question is, so by definition, of course, when we think of affairs, they're sinister, they're cloak and dagger, they're clandestine. Exciting from a
Yes.
Mills and Boone point of view when you're reading about
Yes.
it. Not so excited when you get into one. For a woman,
Yes.
you know, for the man, like I said, you know, discard, use
And
as
so,
you
do you
please.
think it's ever worth it? Because, you know, timing is everything, right? And so you have to kind of accept the fact that some people marry young,
Yes.
some people marry wrong, and then someone comes along who really sparks them. And in a situation like that, isn't it fair to say, you deserve it? You deserve to have your happily ever after. And it comes back to my earlier point of, I think that if something like that did happen for me, I would say go for it, live your life, but I would end things before I start
Sure.
things.
But not everybody thinks like that.
Right.
Because it takes a very brave, you know, you get this, God, she was so brave, you know, to do this and to leave. Not everybody thinks like that. As I said, it goes back to the, oh my God, if I'm not a part of this monogamous setup and the confines of this particular marriage and I stray, what am I going to do? So
Yes.
either I just don't do it. I just turn a blind eye and say, okay, you know what, I'm not happy. I'm not physically happy. I'm not sexually happy. I'm not intimately happy. I'm not emotionally happy. And I just carry on for the sake of It takes a very brave person, even if you're not looking for it, to get out
Yes.
there and say, okay, you know what? I think there is seriously an issue in this
Yes.
relationship and in this marriage, and we need to address it.
Yes.
Men never do it. Okay, men never do. I don't think there's, in my experience, there's been a single man that an Indian man who's actually said, you know what, we need to pick up the phone and call a counselor because there is an issue in our marriage. They stray. They stray. That's how they deal with things.
Right.
You know, and they always, with men, they always take the easy way out.
But women as well, like, I feel like, I mean, I'm not trying to say the men deserve to be excused for their actions, but at the same time, like, even for myself in my marriage where I feel incredibly secure, like, sometimes I do think it's hard to voice your wants and needs.
Yeah, that's
Right?
A woman, that's a
Because
woman
you
thing.
like get into this routine and you get into this rhythm and you feel like, I don't know how I should say that. Like,
Yeah.
you know, I don't know how I should say, like, I don't know, spank me.
But, you know, we have to put ourselves at the other end and say,
Right.
okay, if I did say it, you know, there's really no downside. I mean, okay, women think they're
I'm
going to be
shy,
judged,
baby.
right? You might end up getting spanked and really enjoying it, right? So
I love being spanked.
it's-
You can spank me
I-
anytime.
I feel for women that are just caught up in that because they really need to, as you said, be a little bit more vocal about it.
Yes.
And I think they're just scared. You know, oh my God, like what if I actually say that what I think he's doing in this affair is wrong
Yes.
and it's hurting me and it's hurting my
Yes.
family unit. But if I speak too loud,
Yes.
he's gonna just tell me to shut up and
Yes.
get on with what I'm doing, or he's actually gonna just completely say, you know what, I'm done with this.
Yes.
You know, divorce
Which is
you,
why
take your
I
money
think, like,
and-
I don't have the statistics here. I wish I did. Of when men stray, I mean, how often is it with a young 20-something? Because I think women our age, women who have families, women who have children and have a lot more to lose, have a tendency to not emotively jump into things because of the fact,
Correct.
for all that we've discussed.
Yes.
You know,
Because you have a lot more to
financially,
lose.
emotionally,
Yeah.
socially.
Sure, yeah. You have a lot more on the line.
Yes.
You know, and it goes back again to one, it's still being a man's world.
It is.
You know, it's changing.
Yes.
It's changing rapidly, but it still is when it comes to, and affairs, the kind that we're talking about by definition also tend to happen within these certain parameters in these genres,
Yes.
if you will. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Very unheard of for Indian women. I'm going to go on a limb and say, you know, Indian women to do this because I said if they're unhappy, they generally tend to stay unhappy.
Yes.
Now things are changing. Okay, you know, maybe we have to address these issues, see a counselor. Men never do.
Right.
Men never do. They're few and far between. Hopefully that'll change too.
Yes.
And they just kind of stick. And seldom do these affairs actually, you know, end up working out. It's
Well,
very
I think
sad.
that's just it, right? If we are talking about between 1% to 3% of affairs end in marriage, which
Yeah.
is tiny,
Yeah.
the reality is these things are short bursts
Yeah.
of romantic interest.
Yeah. And the baby that's been had.
Yeah,
I
that
think
was
that's it. I think
2%.
if there's something that pushes, if there's going to be something that'll push the man over,
Yes.
it'll be the woman saying, the mistress or whoever's in the affair with him saying, I'm pregnant, and that gets him
Right.
thinking.
So then I do feel like, I mean, I'm again going to totally play devil's advocate here, that if you have an affair, right, and it does then work itself out, then it is a happily ever after. And hear me out here. So my husband and I had so many obstacles to cross. He's British from an old family. He's a lord. I'm Chinese from a very rich, new money family. And so it was like an absolute clash of my dad going, sorry, old money is no money, you know, and then his family going, sorry, she's after your passport. You know, so it was like we had to cross so many different obstacles. And I think it really made us question at the beginning stages of our relationship of, do we really want to be together?
Right.
Because we have all these hurdles we need to cross
Sure.
between parents. And then my dad disowned me when I'd said, you know, this is the person for me. And he was like, well, then you're not getting any money. You know, and I was losing therefore a lot of money, right? So there was just so many things that that made us question whether we should proceed with the relationship, because it was just easier not to. It was easier to marry within our comfort zone
And
of
your communities and
me with trust fund kid, him with dressage champion. You know, it's like, and so
Cliched, but true.
because we had all these difficulties early on that we had to overcome, I feel like we got all our problems out of the way, you know, in the embryonic stages. And I think when you're having an affair, if two parties are having the affair, you're having to overcome a lot of things. You have a lot more to lose. And so if you can then work it out and find that it's worth working it out, you probably can find your happily ever after, which is why most affairs don't last, right?
because people don't put in enough effort. I think it's
Or they think it's not worth it.
They don't think it's worth it, and it's how they've approached the affair in the first place. An affair is literally just something to have on the side, you know, to just have a little bit of a fling on the side. And if it becomes, the moment it starts to snowball into something else,
They're
I'm
out.
done with it.
They're
From
out.
the man's point of view. From women, I don't think they typically go out saying, okay, you know what, tonight's a night I'm going to have an affair. I think they just tend to bury, this is it. I think they just tend to bury.
It is Friday night, baby.
It's Friday night, let's spice things up. I think they just tend to bury,
Yeah.
you know, things. I mean, whether it's an emotional or a physical or an intimate need. I think for women, at least, and I'm speaking more from Indian women, if it happens, it's something that they just stumble upon. You know, and maybe they're not overtly looking for or trying to fill a void in their marriage or their current relationship and stuff, but they realize what they're missing once they're in this affair. The difficult bit for both is that it becomes hard to leave.
Right.
You know, when you're married to somebody else,
Yes.
as an Indian man or a woman and stuff, and so that's why they're so short-lived. But if you really are, then women sometimes end up falling in love.
Yes.
But as I said, most of the time they end up getting their hearts broken.
Yes.
You know, because the men are, until the man says, okay, I'm willing to pursue this.
Yes.
That's a better way
like
to put
as
it.
a long-term thing.
As a long-term thing, it probably ends in, you know, it's its demise.
And for them, it's like they have a lot to lose as well. Like they have alimony and child support and
Yeah.
God knows
It's not
what else.
worth it to them.
Assets.
They wanna
Parting of the
avoid-
ways.
They want to avoid confrontation. They also
Yes.
want to live in this society. They don't want to be judged and, you
Yeah.
know, sort of or misjudged.
Yes.
And
But
and
that's just it,
It's
right?
just
They,
easy. It's
they
easy
don't
to
have
just-
to worry about
easy
being
to call it
judged
off.
when they embark
Yeah.
on an affair, though.
Yeah.
That's fine. So it's only if they actually go down that path of
Yeah.
the affair is serious that they worry about being judged.
And most of the time, affairs do, I mean, emotional, not so much. There are some emotional affairs, but they end up being physical. And men tend to just outgrow that. Okay, you know, had her been with her.
Yes.
And, you know, I think I've had enough of this.
Yeah,
and
no
why
different
do
to a
I wanna-
marriage, right?
Why do I want to, exactly, you know, I've lost interest. And why do I really want to get, you know, further down the road with this one? I'm just not interested anymore.
Yes.
You know, there's always yet another notch on the belt
Yes.
that I could be looking forward to in the future.
Yes.
Which is why they end abruptly, and women tend to get hurt because, you know, again, they go back to
We get
their
emotional.
self-worth, they get
Yes.
emotional, they tend to nest.
Yes.
Curtains, rugs, whatever Jay wants to call it.
Yes.
And you know,
Castles in
it's
the
sad.
sky. They've already-
it's castles in the sky. They're building castles in the sky, and it's their self-worth.
Yeah.
That's basically what it is. Like, why do I do this to myself? You know,
Yes.
it's almost like you're so masochistic,
Yes.
you know? And there really isn't any need for women to do this if they just take a step back and think through, oh gosh, what is this thing I'm about to embark on? It's not going to end well, at least for
Yes.
me, unless the woman is, deeply empowered and she really
Yes.
wants to do it as a fling because she's like, okay, this, or she thinks like a
Yes.
man,
Yes.
like,
Which is like
like
us.
like that famous line from Cher. My sister always quotes it, and her mom's like, you need a rich white
I
man.
love
And
that.
she's like, Mom, I am a rich
I'm
man.
the man.
Yeah,
Yes.
I am a
love
rich
that.
man.
I love
right?
Cher. We
So,
love Cher.
We love Cher. We love Cher. We always have. We always will. Unless it's a woman who's a lot more empowered, she's financially secure.
Yes.
She is literally out there. Made it very clear to herself, I want to play. And there are lots of women like that, by the way.
Yes.
There are lots of women who deliberately can, will, and have, and it's a prerogative to have an affair. The world is changing.
Yeah, can we
rapidly.
talk about that? Because, I do have this one friend who is very empowered woman, and she does kind of do her own thing. And of course, the men all talk about her in a negative way, right? As they do,
Typical.
right? What is the flip side? Like, do we think that the flip side is empowering? I mean, I'm not sure.
It's a change of mindset as women tend to get more financially secure. It's just a change of the world's mindset.
And
as
I'm
we
old
know
school
it.
because I think the whole idea
I'm
of
old
like
school.
going to a club and picking up like some young thing, even if he's hot, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't even.
I don't think well, I'm thinking, maybe Friday night. No, I'm just
Go to tonight,
Go
baby.
to tonight, baby. So things are rapidly changing. Women are definitely a lot more financially secure. They're a lot more
Yes.
focused on their careers. Even Indian women, my children, case in point. And things will change. I think women will. They won't tend to get themselves into these painful situations, or rather a lot less going
Yes.
forward, because they're going to be a lot more financially, emotionally
Yes.
secure and
But
empowered.
this is just
and that's
also-
something that they have to work
That's
towards.
the crux as well, right? Like
Oh,
we
that's
haven't
absolutely the
really
crux.
talked about this, but I think we've alluded to it a few times, which is the money.
Well, it's not just the money. It's some kind of an
Well, it's
insecurity.
the money, the
Like, why do
security,
you-
and what it
it's
all
like-
means, right?
yeah, like, I mean, why-
we, I think, take a back seat often because we feel like we can't take the front
It's-
seat.
The other point that I'm just thinking now is that we didn't touch upon. We should shed some light on this. Is you have an affair, as a woman, you don't really think about it. You wouldn't do it because you're not. Indian women, by definition, again, culture, they're not that sexual. So it's not a need. My sister
Shut
will-
up. The
my
Kama
sister-
Sutra
Oh my
came
God,
out of
my sister-
India.
My sister will always laugh and say to me, you'd rather have sex with your Chanel bag, okay, than with a man. I mean, it's like you're completely frigid.
I
right?
don't believe that.
It's not.
I'm looking
seriously,
at
I'm
you,
not kidding.
and I don't believe
I'm
that.
not kidding.
No,
right? And it's
you should
just-
blush right now
I'm
because
not
I
a-
don't believe you for a second.
I'm a lot more vocal about it than I am physical about it. But so it's not something that we think about, it's not something that comes to us naturally.
yeah.
So it's not like, oh my God, I really have this need and I'm going to go out and, take care of it.
Yes.
That's one. And that's completely a cultural thing and how we've been brought up.
Yes.
Okay. It's also that security thing.
It's
You
a
know what I
security
mean?
thing.
It's a security thing. Yeah.
Yes.
It weaves into the same thing.
Which is why I think at the end of the day, I think a lot of these affairs are happening between men in positions of power and younger girls, which is why they're short-lived. There's spurts of,
And now it's
virility.
It's starting to flip. Now you'll see it happening a lot more. It is happening a lot more with women in power. It's been happening for a while.
Yeah.
And younger men or men who are not that financially secure
Yeah.
or empowered as yet. And it's a power play.
I mean, what do you
It's
think
a
of the
power
word
play.
cougar?
Well,
I feel like it has
I'm
negative
hoping,
connotations.
I'm hoping that I'd be addressed as one soon enough.
Like cradle robber and cougar. I think, I don't know.
Well, you know what? That's it. The world is changing and it's heading in that direction.
So what's the takeaway from our view of the affairs as we wind this up? Because I have had so much fun talking about this with you.
The point that I wanted to make, actually, which we didn't, I know we don't have much time, is so chemistry was one.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times, and it goes back to the point, Indian women, they don't have that chemistry with their husbands, or they don't even know what the word means or what it's if you actually meet someone who you do have that chemistry with,
spark,
and you click
yeah.
with, and the spark, that's exactly what it is. Is very important.
Yes.
It's hard to ignore that
Yes.
and get away with that. But I hope going forward for women is that they are more secure in themselves. They have a little bit more of their self-worth, that they know they're on the cusp of doing something, not that it's wrong, but something that's not going to end well. And there really isn't any need for them to get themselves into these painful situations. You know, be empowered, you're secure, being financially secure. I think removes a lot of that. You know,
Yes.
it takes a lot of other stuff off the table where you don't really
Yes.
feel, you know, this need to be sort of in a situation like this.
Yes.
And I think that's, you know, that's a good thing. Things are headed in the right direction. Again, for lack of a better way to put it.
Well, I do think that, you know, as you said, when there's a spark, you can't deny it. You know, so I hope I don't spark with anyone
Happened to
else.
me. No, you're committed, and you also have to be very committed to your marriage, your relationship, and you have that spark
Yes.
with your partner.
Well, because we
Which is
had
very
those
important.
obstacles earlier
Yes, so you got rid of
on.
all the stuff.
But at the same time,
all the noise
I'm
at the very
also
outset.
the type of person, because I am such a bookworm and a romantic, I do think that I would advise younger women of, you know, if you're in a relationship and you're not in a happy relationship and something better comes along,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, go for it.
Yes, you
you
gotta address
only
it.
live once. You address it. Like, don't be like the women
Don't
that
escape.
our parents,
Yeah.
our grandparents, right? Our moms and our grandmas who foregone themselves for what they felt was
Yeah.
for the better good.
I don't think they knew any better. You know, your
And
foremothers
I feel
your,
for them. I'm so sad for them because I feel like they didn't really get to experience life.
Yeah. I mean, that's what life was to them.
Yes.
You know,
They don't know better.
Being within the confines of this, I don't think they were not as exposed.
Yes.
I think it boils down to exposure as well. My sister and I were incredibly exposed.
Yes.
So we knew that there was a lot out there as
Yes.
kids. You know, like we lived, like I said, between London and
Yes.
India and stuff, and we saw things unravel and happen.
You were ahead of
before
your
our eyes.
time. That's
we
a
were way ahead of our
reality.
time. Sometimes it's a good thing. Sometimes it's not such a
Yes.
good thing. But I think the exposure also gives you that edge.
Yes.
And that, or maybe not, you know, but gives you those the.
But the
word that I'm looking
awareness,
for is
right?
The awareness, exactly. Yeah.
So on
that there's more
that,
out there.
On that note, for those watching, chase the spark.
Chase the spark.
Try not to become a social stigma. We'll be
Yeah.
taking a break because it's summer, but do message us, DM us, and let us know what topic you would like us to discuss, and we'll see you next time. Toodles.